Good evening, everyone. My name is Daniela Vervloed. This is Teresa Urbano, and we are here on behalf of the Czech Center in Brussels. It's a real pleasure to welcome you this evening to the edition of Science Café, where we will be exploring a topic that touches all of us, which is taste. Every day we make quick judgments about what's beautiful, what's interesting, or valuable, but also what feels kitschy or out of place. But how often do we actually pause to ask why we feel that way? Taste isn't just about personal preference, but it's actually something very deeper social in us. It's shaped by our background, it's shaped by the institutions we move through, and the values that we learned to recognize and admire. And that was actually, or that's the starting point of the book, Pravidla vkusu, or freely translated to English as Rules of Taste, which shows how taste is far from neutral, and it reflects deeper social structures and can even reinforce inequality. What we consider good or cultured is actually quite often the result of historical power dynamics that determine who gets access to culture and who remains on the margins. We, as organizers, we thought this is like something that really resonates with us, because working in culture institutions and public policy, we constantly navigate the questions of value, inclusion, and representation. So we wanted to bring this conversation into the open to you, to question our common assumptions and to explore how taste is shaped, policed and performed in a place as diverse and layered as this beautiful city is. Because in a city like this, where culture, languages and definitions of quality coexist and sometimes collide, these questions are more relevant than ever. And that's why we felt that this was the right time to open up this conversation.
Thank you, Daniela. Let us now warmly thank our partners to the teams of Czech Liaison Office for Education and Research and the South Moravian region representation to the EU for helping make tonight possible. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our guests. We're delighted to welcome Laurie Hanquinet, Professor of Sociology at the Université Libre de Brussels, whose work explores cultural participation, institutions, and how cities shape access to culture. She'll be joined by Ondřej Špaček, sociologist at Charles University in Prague and one of the co-authors of Pravidla vkusu, who studies the relationship between taste, social class, and inequality. Guiding us through the evening is Stephanie Coerten, a Belgian actress and experienced presenter with a deep interest in culture and society. Thank you all for being here. We hope you enjoy the evening and leave with fresh perspective to reflect on. And before we begin, I would like to ask you if you can make some time to fill out our questionnaires. You can find them under the QR codes, or there is also a paper version. So thank you and enjoy your evening.
Good evening, everybody. So hi for the ones who couldn't see me because we were there. I'm Stephanie and I'm going to be moderating the whole evening. I feel very tall watching you all sitting down. So I would suggest a little game just to have a little idea on how you feel about what is culture, what is not. So I will say a list of things, and if you think this, in your opinion, is culture, just stand up. And if you feel it's not, just sit down. And well, anyway, it will wake you up if it's needed, and it will make your knees work. So let's start. Do you feel like physical exercise is culture? I didn't say raise hands, I say stand up. So you can stand up. Okay, cool. You must sit down. Literature. Okay, literature is culture for most of you, not everyone. How about pop music? All right. How about reality TV? Some reactions. We don't seem to have the same idea. Architecture. Yes. How about graffiti? How about tags? You know, the graffitis, but where it's just a name on the walls of your favorite houses. You feel I have an idea about it. Okay, how about gastronomy? Is that culture? Food? All right. Is a hamburger art? Take some time to reflect on your last burger meal. Was it okay? I feel you had a really good one because you feel that, in your opinion, that's art. Okay, so how about Mozart? Is Mozart culture? Yes. Do you think that art and culture is the same thing? You may sit down if you don't think it's the same thing. Is art and culture the same thing? Not really, all right. Some people, yes. Okay, how about keeping up with the Kardashians? Is that culture? Kardashians? I don't know. I don't even know how to pronounce their names. I hardly know how they look like. How about I don't know, TV series? Is it culture? All right. Animation movies? Cartoons? You know, the Wednesday kids programs, Cartoon Networks and so on, yeah? And Miyazaki, on the other hand, also. Okay, that's all culture. All right. How about graphic design? Is it culture? You made it. You are a graphic designer. That's why. So you are convinced. But look around you. Most of the people do think it's culture. So it's... You're saved. All right. I think we more or less got the idea. You may all sit down. Thank you very much. You may give yourself a big round of applause because you moved. So, of course, what is art? What is culture? What is good art? What is good culture? What is not that good is always very personal. I've always been told that taste is something really personal that only belongs to you, but is it that personal, since it's your education, the society, the family you grew in, the schools you were going to, that actually shaped your taste? So what part of it is really personal? What part of it is actually something that was, you know, pushed into your mouth without you even knowing it, since those are things we get since we are very small? So I suggest we all, well, dip in that very wide topic of taste, of culture. Oh, I suggest, since the topic of taste is so wide, let's not have an hour of discussion on whether you like oysters or not, whether it's good or not. That would be maybe for afterwards while we enjoy a glass of wine. But let's just focus on, yeah, the cultural aspect of it. And since we have two very interesting scientific people here, so it's going to be hard because I've been struggling with saying sociology for the whole afternoon. Sociologues, sociologists. Thank you. It's been a long day. We have two very interesting sociologists with us, so I'm very happy to leave the stage to each of them, one after the other, so they can share with you all, with us all, the core of their work, of their research, and how they have been, studying this wide question on taste. And you will have to forgive me for not pronouncing the je correctly, but I will would like to leave the mic to Ondřej Špaček. Špaček. Thank you. So as you can hear, I'm not native Czech-speaking person, but I'm doing my best. So, Ondřej, you can please join me on stage, and we are very happy to have you here to hear more about you and about the book that you've been writing with your colleagues about rules of taste. So the floor is yours. Please, a warm applause.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, for introduction and this warm up, standing up. I don't know how many of you were still standing for each of the culture, and I would want and thanks the Czech Center and all these other people for inviting me from Prague. And I would like to introduce you to my research we did with our colleagues a few years ago, and we are still working on. And next slide, thanks. Okay, so that's me. That you see the R letter, which is hard to pronounce. Okay, so yeah. Thank you, and I will see the slides because I'm used to teaching and see the slides, and I don't want to be with my back toward you. So, in our research, we try to follow a big sociological tradition of research about culture and taste. It's not something completely new, but we want to add our own part to it, and we ask two questions. How is taste and cultural hierarchies shaped among young people, which was partly a pragmatical question because we were able to research young people. But it was also interesting question because when we think about changing the culture, it's probably a good idea to look how young people value things differently or not differently, as it was in the past. And what I would also want you to pay attention is this word of cultural hierarchy, because when Stephanie asked you the question, she was telling culture, and maybe you often say, okay, food is somehow culture and something is somehow culture. But what is more interesting also is some of these parts more valuable in society, more valued, is something more appreciated by people. And when we have the answer yes, something is more valuable, then we can talk about cultural hierarchy, that not every food is same, not every TV series is same. And that is something we were interested in. And the other part of the question was how the institutions somehow shape this taste, because as already was said at the beginning, it's one of the main sociological point is that this taste is not a personal stuff somehow, but is somehow shaped by the institutions, by education, by media, by state, in fact, also how government say what is valuable and should be funded and what not. In our research, just a few words to have some general idea what we did. We did the survey research, which is very popular, and we surveyed the Charles University students. We did semi-structured interviews, which give us very nice in-depth inquiry into this, how people think about culture. We did media analysis. We tried to do ethnography, so some participate observation, but then the COVID came and it was not much of the ethnography because most of the places we tried to study was just closed. So it was, and the funding agency didn't want to wait until the COVID was over just to prolong our project, but we tried. And there are some papers which are in the small letters below. But I would like, it's very hard for me to don't speak with the computer because I'm used to teaching when I always have the computer before me and see the next slide, and it's my point when I can shift it. And this is our book. Yeah, this is the Rules of Taste. In fact, the title of the book is Rip-Off because it's from the rip-off from the famous Pierre Bourdieu book, Rules of Art. So it's nothing original and just translated into Czech. And we have this very nice cover, which I think is very telling because it shows this yellow sign from the technical science, which, as you can find in the Wikipedia, means there are some danger you don't, invisible danger. And I think it's nicely touch one of our argument that the cultural hierarchies is somehow invisible danger because we are considered them natural, natural, something which are embodied in our thinking about some personal stuffs, but in fact can bring inequalities which are not known beforehand. And these are me and my three colleagues happily smiling during our book launch in Prague. Okay, thanks. If I would cast our question in more simple, we were somehow intrigued if this is legitimate culture. The research was done in 2017, so this was the most up-to-date pop culture phenomenon, Game of Thrones, which from our sample group of young students, half of them saw the Game of Thrones at the time. So it was one of the monoculture, as it's somehow called, something that everybody knows about stuff, which is not always today present. And we were, and also it was some kind of discussion of how it's legitimate culture, if it's valuable, if it's something valued. And we had some arguments that these new forms of cultural capital is somehow connected to this TV series. So, for example, this is the new cultural capital. It could be valuable. And we were thinking the young people will tell us that this is culture, this is the art, this is something, this is valuable. However, they don't. They tell us that these things are the legitimate culture, in fact. Of course, they watch the Game of Thrones and they like it very much, but they don't understand it as something, the culture, the big one, the art, something which is valuable. So, how it happens? Yeah, I shift the slide, so I was a bit surprised. They often somehow, when we speak with the Czech students in our research, they often fall back to some what we call some established middle-class repertoires, some the canonized knowledge, something. Of course, culture and art is something that we learn in the school is culture and art, which we were taught about, which was examined during our final examinations, and they didn't even attempt to persuade us, or they don't need to persuade us. We just ask them if that this TV series that they like very much was something legitimate. And I think it's somehow connected with ways how they learn in the school, what is valuable, which is in a very somehow bad way. It's often legitimized by very instrumental reasons that you of course, you need to read this book because you learn the language. You learn the language, you learn the correct language, or it's somehow connected with some knowledge and truth value. You read the book because you learn how it was in the past, how it was historical accuracy. And this is a part of our interviews which represent this deference toward this traditional legitimate culture. When one of our respondents, she's saying that sometimes she asks her mother, what are one of these books that everybody should read? And for example, she told her this is Wuthering Heights, and she'll say, okay, I will sometimes read it. It's probably will be good, and I should definitely plan to read them. It's often the statement. That's, of course, nowadays I don't read, but when I have time, I will read all these classical, canonical books. So, some pictures, plots. How to connect it? Yeah. We find that, in fact, there are these two legitimate cultures, like which are also found in other research. The established one, you see these, there are some kind of cultural space, what people, the students in the survey say they like. And there is the space of established culture where they say, oh, we often go to the galleries, we like to go to art cinema, like to listen to jazz, poetry, and this kind of classical, we call established, or the sociology called established legitimate culture. And this could be somehow connected with emerging culture, the youth one. We ask about True Detective if they saw that in that time, many years ago, House of Cards, the classical classical movies, some kind of way. There are some strange stuff inside, but it makes sense somehow when you look at the structure of the students and the faculties and about their practices of free leisure time. And if you can shift the slide. This distinction, they considered only the culture and art, and this is for them leisure. It's not something they learn how to understand as legitimate. Which was I already said. I don't want to waste your time. So, wow, magical place, and. The one of the last thing I would want to tell is how it's some evidence how it's shaped by the education, because there was very nicely shown in the interviews that what is usually considered as this legitimate and respectable culture is connected with literature and theater, and it's quite commonly known that the Czech culture is based on literature because of the national revival in the 19th century, and was connected with the revival of the language, but not the visual arts. Visual arts is something which is, of course, it's arts. We know it's arts, but we don't understand it. In fact, it's something, of course, you will learn in the school, but it's something you just make some very poor image, and they just give you mark and just pass it away. But nobody. It's not part of the final exam in the high school. The literature and theater is part of the final exam, but the visual art isn't. And it was very nicely shown in the interviews that the people are often afraid of visual arts. And of course, they recognize it somehow, that they know that this is arts. When we show this picture to the interviewers, they know, yes, that's it. We know. We completely don't understand it. It's probably in some gallery. But it doesn't say anything to me. They don't learn how to read it, how to experience it, because the pedagogy of the schooling system doesn't help. I think I will just. I don't have much time left, I think. Yeah. So next slide. I think it's the preview. And this is because I think it's very interesting, this one. This is from our data what it means. This shows the final exam, so-called maturita in the Czech schooling system. There is some kind of official list of books. You have to pick some sample from them, and you could be examined from them. So it's some kind of a consecrated list of books which are important, because they can just examine you from them in the final exam. And the schools assemble this list. And we gather all the schools list, which are 1,000 and more high schools, which their own list, and count which books are common in these lists. So we somehow reconstructed Czech schooling system literary canon. And what's there? Of course, Czechs in this room knows the Czech stuff there, and probably this non-Czech stuff most often also you know because it's kind of this old classical European canon from the first half of the 20th century, and it shows some very limited understanding what could be interesting, what is not interesting, what Czechs know, but international audience don't, is that there are no female author in this list. This top 20, and the female will be, I think, on position 46, Božena Němcová, and then 88, Virginia Woolf or something like that, but 3 women in top 100, and mostly European tradition. Nothing else, and no minorities tradition, which could be in Czech context. So this is somehow high. I could say how education system shapes what we value in some way, and I think the final is something big. Yeah, next slide, please. My final different statement is that what was one of our final findings, which I think would be nice to develop more, is some idea about difference between mobility of the cultural goods and mobility of some cultural repertoires, sociologists, word, which I mean some tools we use for understanding stuff. And so nowadays we have very highly mobile cultural goods. Movies, TV series are very fastly moving. We have a release of movie in many countries in one time. So in fact, this global culture is very fast. But there is a question: when we watch the same movie, do we see the same movie? Could we understand it in the same way? Of course not. But could we value the same stuff about these cultural goods? And I think that we could think about maybe some cultural dimension of European core and semi-periphery, because I think it's something, and I think it's nice to say something about this in Brussels, right here. When we saw and we talking about inequalities, how we could connect this evaluation of culture with the tension between the cores and what is understood as valuable and cultural in European core, and in something we could call some periphery, Eastern countries. And I think we could see in the Czech case some local cultural capital, which I make the picture of the Hobbiton from the Lord of the Rings, because I think it illustrated nicely. And somebody a few years ago already told us that Czech is in some ways hobbits, because they think they know everything. And if somebody goes away and return, it's something what is really suspicious. Yeah, suspicious. Because what could you learn outside? What good could you learn outside? But on the other hand, it works inside. It's tightly knot and something it works. And it's value. You have to know everything. You have to know. You have love when somebody don't know something from the culture, Božena Němcová, Karolínek Mácha, or other stuff that are learned in the school. It's somehow tightly connected. And on the other hand, some way outside the cosmopolitan cultural capital that could connect you to this world of international institutions, corporations, some language that is interoperable and transferable, and you can just move away. And it would be nice to see if there is some tension between this type of way how the culture could be valued in these semi-peripheral countries, which are not the place where this cosmopolitan cultural capital is defined and produced in some way. That's all.
Thank you very much, Ondřej, for this presentation, and thank you for taking us through the way you guided your research on the culture and the view on culture that you can see in the Czech Republic. And now I would like to give the floor to Laurie Hanquinet, who indeed is professor of sociology in Brussels in the ULB. So let's see how you focused on culture and the perception we have here in this country, in Belgium. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having me here. Thank you to the Czech Center. I'm sorry I have my phone, but it's not that I'm getting bored or anything. It's just that my notes are on the phone and my husband stole the tablet this morning. So sorry about that. So I just wanted to show and to share some insight with you from surveys on cultural participation in the Brussels Wallonia Federation, so in the French-speaking part of Belgium. Perhaps to put a bit in perspective what Ondřej just explained, it's slightly different. It's a little bit more at the societal level. So if you could swipe. So these are the two surveys I want to talk about. So basically it's the same survey. One has been done in 2007, the other in 2017. I took part in the 2007 one, but the results haven't much changed in 10 years, so that's also quite important to note. What I wanted to highlight is that we identify 3 main dimensions when it comes to understand people's tastes. So these are the 3 main opposition that differentiate people's tastes, cultural practices, cultural participation. So the main divide between people is a divide between those who are actually culturally engaged, who do basically a lot of things, who declare a lot of different tastes, but also do a lot of different things, as I said, but do very different things, so very culturally engaged, and those who tend to do much less. So that's the first and the most important opposition that differentiate peoples when it comes to taste. The second one is a differentiation between those who are more into classic forms of cultural engagement, like going to the theater, to the museums, and those who are more characterized by younger, festive cultural profiles, where you actually could place the emerging forms of cultural capital that was just talked about. And the third one is a distinction between those who are actually kind of connected, so those who are engaged in digital culture through social media, internet, and so on, and those who actually prefer to have activities, outdoors activities in the park, to see people, to meet people, and to actually have concrete activities outside the home. So it's like a differentiation between what we call proximity culture versus a digital culture. And based on these 3 main oppositions, we could actually identify several types of cultural consumers. In 2007, we had 7 types, but in 2017, we had a little, they had a little less. So this is, the names are there, but they are not that important, and I will explain them a little bit more in detail in the next slides. Well, I just wanted to say that these big surveys were organized by the Observatoire de Politique Culturelle of the Brussels Wallonia Federation. So when it comes to the first one, so cultural disengagement versus cultural engagement, first we could perhaps have a discussion about the word disengagement. But not now, but perhaps later in the debate. But basically, we identified that nearly a third of the population actually showed some form of disengagement. So not only they didn't go to the theaters, to the museums, to concerts, but also they didn't actually go to see friends, to go to parks, to green spaces. So you could actually say that these forms of cultural engagement reflect some sort of social isolation and social exclusion. And this opposition between engagement versus disengagement is actually related or linked to differences in education levels and also professional status. So it is quite embedded in differences in terms of social stratification. On the other side, so you have this big group of culturally disengaged, and you have a smaller group on the other side, so on the opposite side of that spectrum, you have those whom we label the culturally voracious. So basically, the people who tend to do a lot of things and a lot of different things, and who tend to declare that they have a taste for many, many different things. So these culturally voracious, and also you could also add what we call modern amateurs or modern enthusiasts. These people are characterized by high level of education and high status. Yeah. So the second main opposition is between, as I said, classical versus commercial culture. And so you have an opposition between those who are those who are more interested in classical classical forms of culture, and especially those who like to read and read like history books, art books, biographies, essays, and so on, but also comics. So people who are really into reading and who tend also to go and go into places like classical music concert, exhibition space, theaters, and so on. On the other side, you have groups like the party goers who tend to actually do a lot of things as well, but they tend to go to recreation parks, they tend to go to festive places like bars, restaurants, pop music concerts, discos, and some karaoke's and this kind of stuff. So you also have an opposition here, but it's not about the level or it's not about the level of engagement, it's about what you like. So it's really about what you like. And this kind of echoes the famous distinction à la Bourdieu between high culture versus low culture. But having said that, you still need to have some resources to enjoy what the partygoers like. So there are differences in terms of generational and educational levels, but you also have to understand that it's not, in terms of education, it's not as strong as the first division between engagement versus disengagement. Clearly, I still have to say, I mean, a taste for classical culture requires a significant cultural knowledge, what we call in sociological terms, cultural capital, so that's for sure. And the last one is the rise of the digital culture. Having said that, in the latest survey, there has been signs of democratization of access to the digital culture, but there was still, as I said, differences between those who are actively engaged in social media, on the net, versus those who prefer to do stuff outdoors and to be more, have like real physical connections, if I may say. Having said that, this is linked to generational differences, of course, but you also have to understand that actually to be proficient in social media, so for instance, you are influencers or whatever, you have to have knowledge. And again, this knowledge could be considered as cultural resources and cultural capital. So again, this is inserted in social, possibly social inequalities and definitely social stratification. I won't go too much into in details when it comes to these maps, but just say that the map on my right. Sorry, still have problems right and left. On my right, you have, so this is Belgium, and this is a map of visitors of art, contemporary and modern art museums I made, because it's a survey I did for my PhD a while back. And you can see that actually, so the colored dots represent visitors and where they live. And you can see actually that in the rural parts, especially in the southern part of Belgium, you can see that you have actually few, if not no visitor at all who live there. So obviously visitors are close to amenities, cultural amenities, but also there's clearly something about the spatialization of taste here. And this is a map of Brussels. And what is interesting here is that we try to understand where the different cultural types I mentioned, I talked about just now, where they live. And you can see that the culturally disengaged lived actually everywhere, all over Brussels. So that means they are not geographically anchored somewhere. While people with very specific cultural tastes, if I may say, like for instance the classical amateurs, are actually located in specific neighborhoods, such as the southern eastern part of Brussels, which is one of the richest part of Brussels. So what do we take away from this? Could you change? Basically, tastes are yes. These are social markers. They assign value to people in terms of their personality, in terms of their morality as well. So that's important, and their social status. And it's clearly, and cultural participation as a whole is clearly still linked to forms of social stratification. And you can also see that cultural engagement is important when we want to discuss social exclusion and isolation as well. And the last slide, what I wanted to say is that there's clearly a never-ending role of classical culture, and I think you mentioned it very well as well. One of the reasons is that it's still the kind of culture that is taught in schools, as my colleagues Danekin and Rose mention it as well in one of their great papers. So this is, in a way, democratization of culture, and the attendance at traditional cultural institutions is still a challenge, and in a way, it's a never-ending debate as well. And I will conclude on this. What you need to understand now is that the winner. So culture is a game, and is actually it's a game that is related to social inequalities and to social exclusion. But if you want to win the game, what you need to have is a lot of resources, a lot of cultural resources, but also a lot of diverse cultural resources. You need to be able to actually understand classical culture, but you also need to be kind of fluent in new codes like digital culture, but also in emerging forms of culture, like you mentioned. And so the winners are those who actually can navigate in all these different cultural repertoires, since you use the word, and it's very important. And so that's why nowadays we said that the winners of the games are the famous cultural omnivores, so these terms by Peterson, so the people who can actually show off when it comes to Japanese anime and also to opera, for instance. Thank you very much. I will leave it there.
Thank you, Laurie. Please stay on stage, and Ondřej, you join us. Well, this gives us a little idea on your approach on the topic. And we're going to have a few questions discussed here now, but right after that, and mixed with our questions, if you want to ask something, if you have observations, remarks to do, don't hesitate, raise your hand. And Teresa is there with the microphone, so she will be... already, one question before we dig in. Okay, so please... There's already one question there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentations. Very interesting indeed. And I have a question more related to the second presentation, because I found that, you spoke about the different relation of people with culture, different attitudes towards it and everything. But I've the impression that in your presentation there is kind of definition or a concept of culture. I know it's a very slippery concept, but nevertheless, would it be possible to have some kind of definition of what it is? And I know that probably we don't understand, or none of us understand culture in the same way as others, but I mean, just to have a more precise idea of what you had in mind when you presented it. Thank you very much.
Yes, of course.
So two things. This is a survey, so it's a quantitative survey. So this doesn't give us a lot of flexibility in terms of giving the floor to the participants, because they have basically to tick predetermined boxes. So obviously when they created the survey, the observatory, they had a vision in mind. But having said that, they wanted to include a lot of different things. So the definition of culture was actually very inclusive. So that's why we surveyed actually users of social media, use of use of newspaper, going to bars, restaurants, so green spaces. So for them, and I kind of agree with that, all of that was culture. So that's why the idea of people who are disengaged it's worth discussing, because when you have people who are actually disengaged from simple forms of cultural activities like going to bars or seeing friends, that reflects really that there is an issue. Having said that, the culturally disengaged, when I did the analysis, there was one exception, and the exception is that they were watching TV. So that was so you could say that they had cultural practices, but that their cultural universe was revolving around television. So now the question is, what is the value of television?
Thank you for this more detailed answer. One question I would like to ask to both of you is, why are we discussing this? And it seems a bit a straightforward question, but why is this important? And important enough to have sociologists spending years studying this. So why, and maybe both of you could answer this.
Just to change the pace, I think that it also, of course, differs sociologist from sociologist. What we find most important, but for me, I was brought to this topic from the study of social inequalities, because and it, of course, often well connected in both of our presentation, the issue of social inequalities, and I think it's a very important and, as I said, invisible, somehow invisible dimension of social inequalities, and it's connected with a lot of how the differences are translated in different values, different valuations. And I think that we can connect it with much of these lot of stuff we see in the world today, how the different people are valued or not valued, how their practices are valued or not valued. Somehow we can also understand the politics and differences, like the way of taste. I think a lot of the politics could be connected to taste, not about rational calculation of if I want this taxation or this taxation, but somehow connected to taste. And so understanding the taste could be also interesting, and how it's connected to other forms of inequalities could be important.
Mm-hmm. What would be your answer, Laurie?
Well, I usually start with the assumption that culture is actually essential. In contrast to what has been said recently in the media, so culture is essential, but also culture. So that means there is a stake. There is a real challenge to bring culture to the widest group. I mean, the widest number of people and citizens. But having said that, also cultural participation and differences in cultural participation can lead to inequality. So a basic example is one of our colleagues in the US showed that you could be chosen for a job, you can be recruited if your cultural taste actually matched those of your recruiters. So basically, if your recruiter like golf and play golf, and you put golf on your CV, then actually you are more likely to be recruited. So it's not only about who you are and what you like. It's also about actually the actual consequence and concrete consequence that those tastes that the value those tastes reflects can have.
So I wanted also to ask you, but I think that we already had a bit of the answer to that question, is how sociology connected to the topic of taste, of culture, and how the sociology and you in your work have approached the cultural aspect.
Easy one. I have to somehow partially reflect, because I think that my approach, as I use for my research, is somehow criticized, I think correctly, because it's somehow empty. We are in fact not interested in the content of the culture. It's somehow the way we tick in the box, or we ask people, but we are not taking it seriously some way, because it's some kind of a social practice we are seeing and we are connecting, but not approaching it from some kind of analysis of humanities, for example, like this humanities research. And that being said, I lost my path about this topic. I criticized myself, and then I forgot what I wanted to tell positively.
About how you as a sociologist, you approached. Indeed, it's a bit of what you said.
Yeah.
How you connected your study, your research in sociology to the culture and and the tastes in particular.
We can, for example, consider culture as some kind of social practice. It's very general definition, something people do, somehow understand, somehow evaluate. And of course, it can broaden very widely, as we see at the beginning, what is culture is. Because then the pub going and drinking there is part of the culture. And
even marijuana and alcohol and
the Faculty of Art students, that are most of them. In the
yes,
segment,
okay.
It makes sense when you see when
That's culture.
If I show you the and it's in the book, Czech book, where are the students of different faculties, everything makes sense afterwards.
Okay, you understand it did very, very, very well.
Well, I think we both. I mean, we just met, but I think we both study culture from the point of view. I mean, from the point of view of social stratification. So we try to assess the connections and the correlation between social stratification and cultural participation. But having said that, so there are sociologists who are more interested in what culture does to us. So the capacity of culture to bring back memories, to make us relax, to make us feel. So there is this tradition that exists as well, and I think it's worth noting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's always something that I have felt as a personal experience of probably culture omnivore in your graphics, is that the more you have access to culture, the more you have access to a diversity of culture, the more you have a possibility to put words on what you feel, on what you see, to understand the others, to understand yourself. So indeed, it's a really good way of understanding the world around us and to see how much we are equipped to understand the world around us.
And to understand oneself. I think that's why I think, again, culture is very important in our society. So I don't think we need to read the opposite in our presentation. It's just that we need also to be aware that the culture is related to power structures and power dynamics. That's all. That's definitely something culture does something to us, give us the ability to better understand ourselves, and it's very important. These mechanisms are really important. Yeah.
And how big is the importance of the education and the social surroundings, maybe the class you were born in the way you shape your own capacity of making your choice and creating your own taste?
Large.
Large? Okay, thank you for that very brief and clear answer.
Yeah, I think it's big and are also very much connected. It's very hard to disentangle the education and the family of origin, because of course the education, the track of your education, the school where are you going are often connected to the class of your family somehow. In different countries differently, but somehow it's there. And I think where could be, for example, traced in this Czech case. Interestingly, when we talk about, and Laurie also talk about this, how different schooling shapes the way how we approach the culture. When you are taught in the school about culture, because each schooling system teach about culture, but it could do it differently. And for example, in Czech, I think there are some changes from this traditional schooling system that began in the 18th, 19th century to make it more maybe open to this experience part of the culture, not culture as a knowledge, outer title just to know who wrote everything. But this kind of understanding, this kind of more, the repertoire you in fact needs to know if you want to go to the high level of these schooling institutions, or when you talk about these interviews. But these changings are often also based on, for example, on private schooling systems, the opening of the private schooling sectors where are more progressive in some way with these pedagogical approaches. So it somehow reproduces this kind of inequality, that what the kids learn, and on this average public school, they learn this traditional way. Fact, check, knowledge.
Yeah.
Done.
Okay. And how also different cultures are considered or not considered as valuable knowledge. Some things that you have to know, you have to have read Wuthering Heights, but nobody cares if you haven't read, let's say, Harry Potter, which is an enormous success, but might be not considered as equally valuable. I don't know if it was a question.
Yeah.
I ended up with a question mark, but I'm not sure it wasn't clear it was a question. So there's a high.
I think there's a difference between know the Harry Potter, know the Wuthering Heights, and be able to approach it with some clever way. For example, to argue that the Harry Potter is valuable. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the skill of these able people who are competent in the culture, who have high cultural capital, and which are hardly learned sometimes in the school.
Yeah, it's not only what you like, it's how you are able to describe what you like. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, you could actually look very smart while discussing Keep Up with the Kardashian. Mm-hmm. There's a paper on that, but
could you give an example of that?
No, but I mean, you could say, well, there are two ways to approach reality TV. You could say, I just watch it for fun because it's a way for me to escape reality. Or you could say, I watch it so that I better understand, what's wrong with the society and what's wrong with the commercial culture and etc. and the value that it conveys and etc. So there's always a clever way to kind of spin that taste, so that it doesn't look that much as a guilty pleasure that it is. But that's knowledge, that's competence, and that's unequally distributed. So, and this is where parents come in the picture.
Yeah, because you cannot ask the schools to give all the accesses and all the knowledge and all the competences to approach different kinds of culture. How does it trap people in those inequalities too? Is there a way out of that? Or as soon as you were born in such an environment where you don't have access to those, as you said, the private schools, which have a different access, a different approach, that means that you have no chance to escape that?
I think there are not some impenetrable walls. Of course, we are not in some kind of very rigid societies which will have this unescapable traps, but there are hills and slopes which are difficult to scale up. When you look at the probability, for example, in art schools, how students in the art school are recruited, and how many of them are from the families which are also with art background, because they can. But of course, there are some not from these families, but it's just much more improbable.
I think one thing that is good with the internet is that it's true that there are more than before. You have more knowledge that is available to you than before. That's for sure. So there are people who are self-taught, and there are people who can escape from that kind of patterns. And actually, it's probably not as deterministic as one might think, but there are clear tendencies, and if you zoom out, these tendencies have big impacts on the society.
Mm. And maybe when you talk about internet, I think also it could be maybe these trends where nowadays the different valuation is not, for example, about different genres. That there are these low genres and high genres, but often inside one genre you can have a valuable movie, or one movie could be approached with very different. Game of Thrones, for example, could be approached for very different. It could be bridged somehow. It could bridge people because they know at least the facts about Game of Thrones, they see it, and then it could be more approachable when someone show them how it could be understand as what to see in these some cultural products, what could be, how could interpret them, but they already know it. You are not interpret for them some movie they didn't see. You talk about something they did see. It could be maybe a bridge between these different approaches to culture, or how to learn these different repertoires.
Yeah,
maybe
2 points. I think basically, high culture has been more inclusive than before. So you actually have, as you said, you have bad commercial culture and you have good commercial culture. So for instance, if you take Beyoncé and her album Lemonade, it's considered to be good pop culture. And so I think the distinction is not as clear as it was before. That's one thing. And the other thing is that's an important point, actually. The value of classical high culture has diminished a little bit because it has entered in competition with other forms of culture, like nerd culture. I don't know the word, but basically technical culture. So you have all these competing forms of culture, and where people actually can develop an expertise. And if you take the sitcom Big Bang Theory, that's what it's about. Is that you have competing forms of culture that actually, and there's some sort of battles going on.
So you'd say there are more and more kinds of cultures getting value. That means that the ones that were, I'd say, keeping the high level for themselves for a long time are now going down because so many others are going up.
Yeah, I think it's not as hegemonic as it used to be. Definitely.
I turn once in a while in your direction. Oh, there's a hand there. Teresa, please, could you run?
Thank you so much for the presentation. It was really, really interesting. I have 2 questions for both of you. There was the term that I think that was used in the first presentation of sort of cultural goodwill, of having, the list. I'm definitely guilty of that, having a very long list of very long classics in my list for the winter, and it's been going for 7 years. So I have a question of how does this sort of goodwill, or this perception of having this list of one day I will read this, maybe shapes this cultural potential that we feel and like our relationship to culture. And my second question for both of you is, what was the most surprising thing that you learned in your research, something that really, really surprised you or you were not expecting? Thank you.
Thank you for both questions.
I began to think about the second question and it just stunned me. About this cultural goodwill, in fact, I don't know. I still partially believe it could be somehow, but it's just a hypothesis that I don't have much evidence about, connected to the age of our participants. Like when we asked them, they were first, second year students at university. a part of this searching for what is. And when I reflect my experience, I think 10 years later they don't care about this cultural goodwill, but maybe not. But I don't have the evidence about it. And about these surprises, maybe I'm already too much talk about this, so I don't have this first-hand experience of the surprise. But I think the first experience of surprise during my research was when I realized that I'm old. When I ask the students what they like, and then I count the years when they are born, and then I found, okay, so what I thought that it's general knowledge. They saw this movie because everybody saw it, and I realized, okay, they were 6 years old when it was released. They probably didn't see Lord of the Rings as when it was released in the movies. But it sounds funny, just a funny experience. But I think it has some general thing that we often are freezed in some understanding of the world, which is and things. Of course, we know about the world, but it's shifting, and the other in culture is very pronounced how it's changing quickly, and these general stuff are not longer general in different generations, and we should keep attention to this.
It's something that shocked me once in a discussion with my mother, because she was so outraged that she heard some young people on television not know about, I can't remember which very, very famous author or painter that seemed so obvious. Everybody had to know. It was impossible. It was such a lack of the minimum culture, education. It was impossible to understand. But then, my mom is almost 80, and we had to talk about the fact that, but there's so many more that arrived afterwards, and so many relevant authors, painters. So it's impossible to keep track on all of them. And of course, you have read Balzac when you were young, because, well, I'd say the choices they had at school was probably still smaller. And so it was amazing, but there's so many other amazing books, films, series, painters to discover now. So it's quite impossible to keep track on the things that seem to be obvious when she was young, when you were young, when I was young, which are all three different generations and another generation compared to the young audiences you've been interviewing. Maybe you would like to answer now.
I'm not sure I got the question about the goodwill, but is it where is it coming from? Is that your question?
It's like, so for example, when there was the example of Wuthering Heights. Of Wuthering Heights, that in the interview, if I remember correctly, the young lady was, my mom told me that this is important, so I should read it one day. So having this list of one day I will read this, or one day I will go to a museum to see Mona Lisa or something. Having basically this sort of read later list. What effect does it have on us? Like, do I feel like if I, how does it basically shape my cultural perception? I don't know if it makes sense.
I think it just reflects the social pressure on our taste, and the social pressure actually we put on our taste, and the fact that again this idea of guilty pleasure as well, that I would prefer watch a stupid series on the Bridgerton on TV than actually read Balzac, to be honest. But I know that it's not as valuable in society if I say that during a drink or something. So I think it keeps kind of annoying us, because we know we should elevate ourselves. We should be intellectually stimulated, but we got lazy.
A very quick survey. How many of you have a pile of books that they know they should read and want to read one day? Okay. So it's all of us, almost all of us.
And In terms of surprising thing, I can share an anecdote I had on my fieldwork in contemporary and modern art museum. I think I will remember that anecdote for the rest of my life. So I was trying to talk to people in the cafe of one of the biggest museum in Belgium, because that was my way to actually try to get them and grab them, and so that they don't have any choice then to talk to me. And eventually I found this man, and I said, "So why do you come today?" He said, "Oh, I just come for the coffee because I don't like art, and my wife wants to come, so I just stay at the cafe while she's actually she's actually visiting the gallery." And I'm like, "Okay, so you actually are a visitor, but you are not a visitor." So I find that very interesting. Mm-hmm. It was so repulsive for him to go in there that he just preferred to stay on the cafe. He was there, he was present, and he even paid the ticket, but he just preferred to go to the cafe.
So indeed, that must be very surprising. So are there? Oh, there's another question there, and another one here.
Thanks a lot. I'm wondering, what do you think are the reasons why a piece of art becomes classical or immortal? Because there are some pieces of art which are popular at their time, and then the popularity remains. So it's like William, but then there are others which are popular at that time, but then decades after they become forgotten. But then there are also pieces of art which at that time they are completely irrelevant, like the Impressionist painters or Vincent van Gogh. Their career was complete, disaster. They were laughed at their time, and now they are valued, and their paintings are sold by incredible sums of money. Do you see any reasons, or is it just something above us, maybe?
So, do you see something like a timeline on and due to expiration date on some artwork?
Based on the work of colleagues who have worked on that, I would say it's about the myth you can create around the artwork, and whether you have actually people like tastemaker who are able to carry on the myth. So Van Gogh is a very good example. He was not that actually frowned upon when he was alive. He was considered as potentially good. It's not me who's saying that, it's Nathalie Hennig. So he was considered as potentially good, but then when he started to cut his hair and then kill himself, he kind of embodied perfectly the bohemian artist, l'artiste maudit. I forgot how you say it.
Cursed artist.
The cursed artist, and he represents so well that myth that it was easy to continue and to actually to continue praise his work, but actually to make his work art sacred art. So I think it's about the myth, and I think the myth of the cursed artist is still very much powerful nowadays. And you can still find in art school, you can still find in art gallery, and that myth is probably one of the reasons why some pieces of art continue to be so valuable.
And how about the pieces that disappeared in time, or disappear then reappear? You can see that sometimes with classical music, where you have some composers who are played everywhere all the time for, I don't know, decades or even centuries, and one day they just disappear. Nobody plays them anymore, nobody knows them anymore, and they would reappear 100 years later because just someone rediscovered something. How would that be explainable, if it's explainable?
I would just say it's about the values that the tastemaker at the time wants to focus on.
It's marketing in a way.
Yeah,
it is.
In fact, there is the field of the sociology that deal with these cultural markets and how it works. And I think it's a part of the stuff I was telling beforehand, that somehow the sociology could be criticized from this point of that. We are not saying that it is good art. We just say, oh, it's just marketing stuff. But it's not that way. But
okay, it's part of an answer. Hard to know for hard to apply to every artist that has been creating and that will be creating, but it's part of an answer. There was a question right there, then there's one there, and then it's you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, actually, like taste is evolving, is changing. And my question is very simple, actually. Is there anything universal about taste, like throughout historical periods or cultures? I actually realized that you both created your slides in black and white. And so is there anything like, I don't know, less is more or something like that? Thank you.
The background has become black only 2 hours ago because they realized that the light in this room was not enough to have it with a white background. So that's a little piece of answer to that part of the question.
But it was white before it was black, so it was just keep it just still simple. But it was for example, difficult when we are inventing our cover of the book. We wanted something that just doesn't stick to some taste, but of course everything sticks to taste. So even our try to bypass this question by making it most technical. Of course, it's another kind of taste to make it like a sign from the construction yard. So, but of course, this is not answer to your question. From my point of view, I wouldn't. You know, there are these kind of cognitive studies of taste and all these golden ratio stuff, aesthetics, which I know nothing about, and it will be very difficult for me to talk about this kind of aesthetic because sociology somehow bypass this stuff by saying, "Oh, it's power structure."
Yeah, as a sociologist, I feel compelled to say there's nothing universal. But having said that, I think perhaps that art is good for the well-being is universal. That's what I would say. Yeah.
I have the feeling that it's quite impossible to get something that would be universal, that would be pleasing everyone, everywhere in the world, and all at once. I got the feeling I'm citing it from film title. A friend of mine had a big argument on internet lately. Thing that she never should start with, but she did, because someone was criticizing a sculpture or an architecture. I don't remember what it was. Sorry, my memory is terrible today. But my friend just said, well, that's the point. The point is not to please everyone. The point is to make you think, to make you react, to make you feel things. And one guy on the other side was very angry, saying that art has to please everyone, otherwise it doesn't have the right to exist. I feel that it would be very dangerous to have art or culture that would...
But is it to exist or to be funded?
Well, good question. Probably in that person's mind it was the same, because, well, you cannot dissociate art or culture from funding and money, and that's always been through time. There are always been people, you know, helping artists or people making culture just to eat, pay the rent, and not that many artists are coming from very rich families and able to just do what they want for no money. So I suppose that's the relationship with the money is always one of the reasons why some people would just be angry if something exists and they don't like it. So there was one question here with the stripes t-shirt looking around you. I think it's you.
I'm just playing with a thought. You inspired me to... I'm thinking about Simpsons. Is it high culture? Because it has been massively successful. but it's about low culture, and it sounds weird to call it a high culture, but everybody likes it. People enjoy it. So what is it? How do we value it?
I think we don't need to think in this classification high, low culture. I think this is something Laurie was talking, that it's somehow it's no longer that simple. It could be during the 19th century you can see a clearly defined high culture, but now there are more competing valuable cultures. And I think that The Simpsons could be a nice example, maybe better than the Game of Thrones, like how it's rich with very more subtle indices of who you can be. You can show or only feel your competence to show some very little pun in the episode that somehow connect to maybe high culture phenomenon. And it could be part of the reading, how you can relate to it. And you have very simple jokes there also, which even the kids understand. So it's somehow eclectic in this way, like it very eclectically connects different cultures, and in some way, of course, which also make it difficult, because when you tell you like Simpsons, you don't know what you like. When you told me that you like Simpsons, I don't know what are you talking about, in fact.
What part of The Simpsons do you
part
like?
of Simpsons you like? So,
yeah, true, because it could be political, actually. Although it's anyway, I was going into too much. I think it could definitely be integrated into highbrow cultural profile that shows some tendency to eclecticism. So it's a not direct way to say it could be considered highbrow by some, but not necessarily by everyone. It depends. Again, I think I have some colleagues in the history department at ULB. I don't think they would consider The Simpsons as highbrow culture. But I think if you start again from this idea that the more knowledge you have, the more cultured you are, then knowing and actually kind of being, having a deep knowledge of The Simpsons and why it is relevant, why it is socially important, etc., it could actually be considered as legitimate culture.
Thank you.
Thank you. So there was a question right here with a blue shirt.
Thank you very much. Two quick questions, and then I'll try to explain what I mean. The first question is, what do you think about the David Riesman definition of other-directed men? And the second question is, how you think the geopolitics influence culture? David Riesman is a sociologue, an American sociologue, I think, and in the 50s he created the word other-directed men, saying that in the 20th century, the people are normally are influenced by the others, contrary to the people of the 19th century, where they made more their own choice. So nowadays we perceive to be free to make our choice, but we choose just around us. It's like we pretend to know all the food of the world, just going to the restaurants in Brussels. And another example, all of you quote TV series or Hollywood, but none of you quote Bollywood. Of course, it's far away from, at the moment, it's far away from us, but it's not excluded by culture. And the second question about geopolitics, in this respect of the first question, do you think that we make our choice according to a kind of geopolitic world that we perceive? Two other questions. All of us know the Colosseum or the palace where Charles the Great ruled. Do you think the Colosseum is in Rome? Do you think the Colosseum is in Italy or is an Italian monument? Do you think that the palace of Charles the Great is in Germany or is a German monument?
I could begin from the second one, because the first one I'm still digesting. And Maybe also I will answer the second question a bit differently when you talk about the geopolitics. Or it's somehow connected with what I tried at the end to talk about this core semi-periphery stuff, because when we started our project, I really wanted, because there was something I was feeling that could be interesting, and what I feel in this area of culture was this culture transfer, and maybe there is some kind of also some reference when we are in Czechs. There we are, of course, not of course, but it's kind of the sociological, of course, referencing to some West, because we understand ourselves, we are West, then we realize we are Central Europe, and then we realize that we are not Central Europe because there is only West and East Europe. But we are still talking about this story about the West, and it's part of the argument. Something is good because it's done there. It's done in the West, so it should be good. And it was my hypothesis that we could somehow track this kind of valuation of the culture, that it's somehow will be tracked, that something is valued because it's consecrated in the core, European core, we can call. And so but we didn't find it, not that it's not there, but we have no data. We didn't gather data that would maybe we even didn't use methods that would allow us to gather this kind of data to show this kind of spatial transfer and directions. I think maybe it's different than you ask, but it's somehow, I feel some affinity to this type of questions.
I was just thinking about the fact that our tastes are actually influenced by the nations we live in, by its culture, and also by its historical relationship to others. So, for instance, if you take the UK, if you ask Brits, I used to live in the UK, so if you ask Brits to quote one of the national dishes, they would quote curry. Mm-hmm. Why? Because of the past, the post-colonial past, the colonial past, and the former relations between India and Pakistan and the UK. And this goes, I mean, we are influenced as well by the past, our historic past with the Ottoman Empire. So we actually can see, so there were projects where we could ask, and this was actually quite visible for food. So we could ask people their taste in terms of food, and we could actually identify how history and geopolitics could influence taste clearly. So that's one thing. And the other thing is the cosmopolitan. And for instance, Bollywood is clearly, if you want to be a true cosmopolitan person, you can't actually only like movie from Hollywood. So you will have to open up, whether it's, as I said, Japanese anime, whether it's Korean film, or whether it's Bollywood. So nowadays, if you want to look truly open, and that goes actually not only in terms of taste, but also in terms of, to be socially tolerant, you also have to show that you like many different things and not only from the West.
What I find quite intriguing is the idea that you have to know these. You have to be aware of what happens in Iceland, in India. You have to know what the culture is like in all those countries. You have to read the books in the pile of the classics. It's really heavy, actually, and the more the more the world is accessible, I feel that the more we have such a social pressure to be able to cite from all kinds of different cultures, and if you don't, that means that you are not good enough. So the hierarchy seems to be heavier, and I understand more and more the people who just stay at the cafe of the museum, because it suddenly seems too much. It says I won't start because I feel stupid, because as soon as I open one book or one theater catalog or one concert catalog, I just don't know where to start because there's so much, and I feel I have to master them all without even starting.
True. But I think it's also...
Thank you. Okay, this finishes.
I think it's also the way I talk, and also perhaps because we are both interested in social stratification, because some sociologists have said that we are actually at an age where you can create more easily your own biography. So in a way that social pressure is not as transparent as it used to be. So some have argued that we are freer than in the past. We are freer from traditional social constraints like class, family, unions. I don't fully agree with that, but some have said that. So perhaps you could try to take their side.
Yeah. Well, I hope I can imagine that pressure, the pressure I feel and I hear, is also due to the generation I am in, and I hope that the younger generation will feel more free just to go to the buffet and just pick what they want to taste.
A lot of my students told me that, so they were like, "Yeah, what are you talking about? Like, we can build our own taste." But I don't fully agree with that because, as I said, there are real social consequences to what you like.
I think we're slowly arriving to the end of the meeting. I would like to finish with one question, one quick, difficult question, and maybe that question could open to you too. We do understand how important it is to keep the culture accessible and to make it more accessible to more people because of all the things you described in the beginning of the presentation. What could we do? What should we do to improve that? And it's one question that brings one answer that can be personal, that can be true today, false tomorrow.
Yeah.
But
will be. I think that I could answer, and it probably shaped maybe that I'm now with experience of have kids that are going through this schooling system, and that's why I'm just always returning to it. But I see a lot of stuff going on there, and I think we are not able to teach everything, of course, because each curriculum is huge and it doesn't make any sense. But in case of the culture, it could be a way to at least teach in the schools to how to learn to like, not to like, but to understand, to approach the culture, not the stuff, all these lists of stuff, but how to work with it. Maybe it's harder to teach it, but I think it's worth the time.
Mm-hmm. So teach her to learn instead of teach stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Good suggestion. How about you?
So I think when it comes to culture, there are two challenges. The first one is the democratization of culture, and the second one is cultural democracy. And I think we actually need to work on both fronts. So cultural democratization is trying to give real access. So I'm actually talking about symbolic access to classical high culture and to classical, traditional place of culture like museums, theaters, and so on. And for that, I think education and schools are really, really important. So we really need to do something in terms of shaping better the curriculum. So I think we made some efforts with the PECA, so that's another discussion. But there's definitely something more to be done there. The second one is the democracy of culture. So that means giving value to forms of culture coming from other groups. Socially minoritized groups. I'm gonna make it. So to give value to a wider range to give social and aesthetic value to a wider range of cultures.
That could be a good start too. So, do you have any good ideas to improve things or to make things evolve in the right way? Or maybe you will have more ideas after a glass of wine. I think that we have reached that moment where indeed the conversation will go on, but in a less formal way on the other side, because we are now going to have a drink together. Thank you very much for attending to this discussion. And thank you, Ondřej, and thank you, Laurie, for being here and accepting to sit on those very uncomfortable chairs, because you are seen by everyone and heard by everyone. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise. And now let's have a drink.